afternoon, folks, and this is Maggie Rose, and this is the New Concord Hour being brought to you proudly by the Microeffect Radio Broadcasting Network out of Idaho. And today's show, the New Concord Hour, today is Wednesday, and Wednesday is usually when us gals get together, and we encourage the men to call into the show as well. I think we have Donna up right now. Are you with me, Donna? Hello, is Donna there? Oh, hello, this is Maggie Rose. Is Donna Hammond there? Well, I don't hear her anyway until I hear that she's been brought in. I understood that she was there, but Cy hasn't linked into the show yet. So we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to share some news with you all out there. I received this from Liberty Sherrill out in Nevada, and Just Chris also has this information. He's the electrifier that has been getting the information for us regarding a lot of what's happening across the country right now with the news media and what is happening regarding the Bundys. I received this morning from Liberty Sherrill, and she said more prayers are needed this week, this time for the Sharp family. Now, folks, if you recall, the Sharp family, it was Odalis, O-D-A-L-I-S Sharp of Auburn, had taken her family to perform for the occupiers in Oregon. Her daughter, Victoria, was the one riding in the truck with the rancher, Lavoy Finnegan, who was shot when he ran into a roadblock. In this update, it said that Sharp, in an interview, said that the state had taken 7 of her children. Now, as you all know, that she has been divorced from her ex-husband, and over time there had been a custody battle that had been going on between her and her ex-husband. And she had full custody of the kids, and she traveled around the country singing constitutional, patriotic, and Christian songs. She was there at Harney County, had been singing for the occupiers there at the Wildlife Refuge. She also traveled down to Utah with most of her children, and she was singing there at the in and about the area where we had the memorial service for Lavoy and the memorial service for Shauna Cox's son the very next day. From what I'm understanding is that because of the fact that she had been involved with the Bundys, her children were taken away from her, or the children supposedly called the Child Protective Services and said that they didn't want to be with their mother any longer. So we don't really know the details about that. What I can tell you is that the information that I was given, and of course, folks, this is, just coming over the news media, and also from some of you listeners out there have shared this with me. And there's an article that came out in the Kansas City Star. This is the state of Kansas. It says a Kansas mother who went to Oregon standoff was arrested in assault on an officer. Now, I don't know what that's about. I really have no idea. But supposedly in an interview, Odalis Sharp said the state had taken 7 of her children. Sharp had taken her family to perform for the occupiers and then returned to Auburn, Kansas. Her oldest daughter, Victoria, as you know, was riding in a truck with the rancher who was shot when he ran a roadblock. Now, I don't understand all the details about why she was taken into custody, but this is what I've got from this article. She was taken into custody Friday after allegedly hitting a law enforcement officer after child welfare officials had come to take away some of her children. A Kansas woman who took her children to sing this winter during an armed occupation of an Oregon Wildlife Refuge was arrested last week in connection with an assault on a law enforcement officer's jail officials said. Odalis Sharp, or Odalis, of Auburn, Kansas, was booked into the Shawnee County Jail at 7:48 p.m. last Friday in connection with a battery of an officer, a misdemeanor, and was interfering with a law enforcement officer, which is considered a felony. This was stated by the jail officials. She was arrested in her home and released Saturday. She was released Saturday on a $3,000 bond. Now, it appears that in an interview Tuesday, Sharp said that state child welfare workers have removed 7 of her children, ages 6 through 17, from the home. Quote, "I am a mother lioness who's been robbed of my children," unquote, said Sharp, who made headlines in January when she took 7 of her 10 children to Oregon to perform for the militants. They call them the armed militants. Folks, we know that they were not militants. But this is what the article is calling them, armed militants who had taken over the Mauer National Wildlife Refuge. No charges, apparently, had been filed as of Tuesday morning. A spokesman for the Shawnee County prosecutor could not be reached for comment. Records show that Sharp attended a hearing in Shawnee County District Court last week on an eviction case filed last year by the owner of the property that she's renting. The court had ordered Sharp to vacate the premises last September. Sharp appealed the ruling, and the court had ordered her to post a $1,500 cash bond for each month until the appeal was decided. Now listen to this, guys. Sharp appealed the ruling, and the court ordered her to post a $1,500 cash bond each month until the appeal was decided. Court records indicate the payments were made from October through April. At last week's hearing, a trial date in the case was set for May the 15th. Sharp told that the arrest occurred after she'd gone back to court Friday and attempted to file paperwork accusing her landlord of a breach of contract for not taking care of the property. Now, it further goes on to say, she said the judge wouldn't accept it. When she returned to Auburn, Kansas with her 6-year-old son, she said, there were 3 sheriff's cars and 2 workers from the Kansas Department of Children and farmers' families that were waiting for her. They wanted me to go with them, Sharp said. They wouldn't let me go to the house. One grabbed my arm and my legs and dragged me out of the car. I kicked the woman officer. She said 6 of the other children had been taken by child welfare workers while she was away. 3 older children live elsewhere. Sharp said the sheriff's officers arrested her and took her son. Quote, they're all in DCF custody now as far as I know, unquote, she said on phone calls, during which she cried, prayed, and sang religious songs. Quote, they're evil. They steal kids. This is the devil against my family, unquote. She said Children's Department workers had paid her at least 2 visits since returning from Oregon, but that she told them she didn't have time to talk. She said someone, possibly the children themselves, had apparently called the Child Abuse and Neglect Hotline recently, and that's what led to the Friday's incident. They're making false charges, she said. They won't tell me anything. They've stolen my children's hearts and they've turned them against me. It's conspiracy. After Sharp, age 46, took 7 of her children to Oregon this winter, her oldest daughter, Victoria, age 18, who had recently moved to Montana, joined the Sharp family singers on January the 25th. The next day, Victoria Sharp was riding with Nevada rancher Lavoy Finnegan and 3 other militants, including standoff leader Ammon Bundy, when Finnegan ran a roadblock and was shot and killed by the Oregon State Police. If you remember, folks, he was shot 3 or more times in the back. The teen has since become a rising star in the Patriot movement, accusing the government of overstepping its bounds and attending court hearings in Oregon to support those arrested in the standoff. Odila Sharp and 7 of the children had performed in the Kansas Capitol in Topeka in March. That's in Topeka, Kansas, folks, where Sharp was supporting Raymond and Amelia Schwab, whose children had been placed under the supervision of the Kansas Department of Children and Families. In between songs, Sharp told onlookers that authorities had tried to murder her daughter during the Oregon standoff. Now, folks, we have another article here about Victoria Sharp. Do we have Donna on board with us yet?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Do we have Cy with us? I guess Cy's not here yet. Okay, I'm going to finish reading this, Donna, and then I'd like us to talk about this. The other article goes on to talk about Victoria Sharp, an opinionated teen in a talented family. The pastor of Auburn, Kansas Church of the Sharp family once attended speaks of Victoria, now a champion of the patriot and militia movements. This was written by Rick Montgomery of the Kansas City Star. Sharp has a history in court with child welfare officials in Kansas. 2011, the Kansas Department of Children and Families removed her oldest child, then 15, from the home and placed him in foster care after substantiating reports that Sharp had abused and neglected him. Sharp filed a petition for judicial review in 2012, asking the district court to overturn the finding. When the court did not, she filed an appeal. The appellate court, in an opinion filed in October, sided with the lower courts. Sharp said in a testimony in 2014 legislative committee hearing that the Child Welfare Agency had stolen her son because of false abuse allegations. Sharp told the Star on Tuesday that the family had been performing in several states since the standoff and planned to travel around the country for the rest of the year. But she said the older children, including Victoria, have left the path I put them on. The best way to describe Victoria, she said, is that she's like her horse, Spirit. She's young and pretty and very spirited. She's got all that past her, but she wants to be out of bounds. And when she gets out of bounds, she leaves the others with her, and she's hurting my family. It's a shame. Sharp said she has a hearing Wednesday in juvenile court. Quote, Jesus is on trial tomorrow, unquote, she said. Quote, the children are not my children. They're God's children. He has anointed them, and you don't mess with that, unquote. Now, when you go and you read this article, first of the fact is, and I think you would agree with me on this, Donna, I have seen children being taken away from their families for years. I sat on a Blue Ribbon task force that was in Contra Costa County, California. And there was a man there, Donna, that had been complaining because his children were being raised by his ex-wife, who was actually having sexual relations on the living room couch with her girlfriend. And, you know, I'm not sitting here to judge somebody's sexual gender or what they prefer to do, but you know what? They should not be doing this in front of their children, at the very least, okay? And he was complaining to the courts about this, and they ignored him, so he went on a hunger strike and was complaining that not only were foster children being abused, but even children that were being adopted out by the courts were being abused. And he went on to further find out that the main children that are being taken away from their parents are not the Indian children or the Hispanic children, because pretty much the Indian and the Hispanic families kind of pretty much most of the time take care of their own. And it wasn't the black children, and it wasn't the Asian children so much, or the disabled children, or the children that had physical or mental deformity. It was the beautiful Caucasian children under the age of 5, usually with blonde hair, blue eyes, that were very, very adoptable, and that doctors and lawyers and other people out there that had a lot of money but either could not have children or wanted to have more children and couldn't have children any longer were adopting these children, and they were being pulled into the foster care system, many times on exacerbated, trumped-up charges. And when the children were taken to a foster home in another county to get them far away from the parents, then the parents weren't able to easily get to the foster home to visit their children, and they would maybe take taxis or buses to get there and knock on the door at the time allotted for them on the day allotted to see the foster mother walking out the door and saying, sorry, I've got an appointment with 2 of my foster children at the doctor's or the dentist. You're just going to have to schedule for another time. And this went on over and over again, where the parents became very frustrated because the system was totally against them. The foster mother's making money. The court system's making money. Even the county gets so much money per child brought into the foster care system from the federal and state government. So everybody's making money on these children. And eventually the children are put up for adoption, because what happens is the parents go to court and say, the foster mother will not let me see my children. I've made all these attempts, and they keep coming up with excuses, and the judge will not even let the actual biological parents talk. And then right there in the courtroom, he strips them of their parental privileges and rights and immediately puts them in the system to put them up for adoption, of course, to usually a wealthy doctor, a lawyer, or somebody with money. So, you know, and also we're seeing here, Donna, we know over and over again that Christians under attack constantly, and it's been all over the news that evangelical Christians, which Mrs. Sharp is, that evangelical Christians are even under more attack than just your standard Christian that pretty much practices what they believe, and they don't like shove it in your face, and they're not out in the open with it. So here she is having her children taken away from her. She's not being told how she can visit her children, what she needs to do to get her children back, and she has the last child with her, and as she's being yanked out of her car, being physically manhandled, of course she's kicking to defend herself. Now, remember, we don't have a right to defend ourselves, not physically and not with guns, right? So now this last child's taken away from her, and obviously that the court systems are going to find every way they can to stack everything against her. What do you think about this?
It's horrible, of course. And I think it's only going to get worse as time goes on. They're targeting anybody, I suppose, who has anything to do with standing for the Constitution or anything to do with the Bundys to, squelch the Liberty Rising movement. And you do your own sort of where you shut yourself down and you kind of withdraw from the movement, you withdraw from saying anything, and you effectively have censored your own right to free speech. You've censored yourself out of fear. And that's a tactic that appears to be what they're hoping for, is that less people will move that direction and out of fear that, well, the federal government can do whatever it wants, and so I don't want to live in that fear, but it's sort of a catch-22. If you don't stand up, your children will still eventually become slaves. So
exactly.
It's either you fight the fight now, despite the terror that may come, because it's coming either way. It's either now or later, and the sooner we do it, the less bloodshed there will be left for our children to suffer.
Exactly. Now, that article, somebody in the chat room was asking, that article came out of the Kansas City Star, and that was May 3rd, 2016. It was an article. That was the one that actually shows the mugshot of Mrs. Sharp after she's been arrested. Now, the other article that came out has a picture of her daughter, Victoria, and that was written by Rick Montgomery, of the Kansas City Star. Rick Montgomery was the author of that second article that came out about the same time. Now, I have to share with you, you look at an 18-year-old girl that was in a vehicle she was not supposed to walk away alive, okay? And right now, as they're trying to say, is that she is the rising star and the champion of the Patriot movement. When I saw Victoria again, all right, I saw her in Prineville when, Donna, you put on that get-together for everybody at the high school so we could listen to Sheriff Mack talk. Do you remember that evening? It wasn't very long ago.
Absolutely, sure. That was
okay. Now, were you out there in the lobby after the talk was over? And he had a table out there, and which I think the main reason he does this is to sell his book and sell memberships into his Sheriff's Association. Do you remember standing out there in the lobby when Victoria and Sheriff Mack were out there talking to each other?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Now, I know Victoria tried to deny this later, but I was standing there with a book that was written by Sheriff Mack asking him to autograph it. And I could not get him to autograph it because for a full 10, 15 minutes, he and Victoria were not talking calmly. They were practically in a shouting match with each other in front of many of the people that were still there in the lobby. And the reason why they were in the shouting match was because Victoria felt that everybody needs to go to Montana and stand up for one of these last two guys that the FBI was going after, that they wanted to arrest him because he had supposedly been involved with the Bundys. And I don't remember if he was involved with the Bundys out in Bundyville 2 years ago, or if he was involved in the situation in Harney County. But he was basically disappeared, and his family was protecting him. And the sheriff out there has no cojones to do his job as the head of that county. And he was saying, well, we have to make sure that his rights are upheld, and we have to make sure that everything's done legitimately. And according to Victoria, she had just come from there, she said. She had been with his mother, and she felt that Sheriff Mack should take a stand to protect this man. And Sheriff Mack, who I disagreed with what Sheriff Mack said, he said, oh, no, you expect this sheriff to stand and protect the people in his county. Well, if he does that, then he's not going to be able to be a constitutional sheriff. And if he does that, it's going to ruin everything I'm trying to do with the Sheriff's Association. So basically, he and Victoria, as you remember, were getting into a shouting match with each other in the lobby. Do you remember that?
I did not witness that. Sorry.
Okay. That was at the very, I guess it was at the very end of, before we walked away, they were yelling at each other. And basically, I was telling her to listen to him and asking him to listen to her and telling the two of them they need to lower their voices. And they were so angry at each other at that point. He was shaking his finger in her face, and she was getting up into his face. And I saw the point that he was making, but I also...
Oh, my gosh.
What?
That takes guts for an 18-year-old. Oh, my gosh.
Yes, it did. She got into his face, and he's shaking his finger down at her. I mean, he towers over that little lady. And even though I could see the point that he was saying that maybe it was not the sheriff's position to have to get there and stand up to the FBI per se, but then again, I agreed with Victoria that somewhere along the line, we have to draw a line in the sand. And I think what Victoria was saying is, Lavoie has been murdered. People have been arrested as political prisoners. Children are being taken away from their parents. The government is stealing land every time we turn around. They're rounding up cattle and murdering the Bundy's cattle. They're trying to take the cattle over state lines without any of the proper paper showing the cattle had been purchased, had been properly branded, had been properly vaccinated, that the BLM was hiring these two men in Utah to actually come and round up these cattle, which is state and federal felonies and misdemeanors, and that Victoria was saying enough is enough. There has to come a point where someone says, we're not going to take it anymore. And she expected Sheriff Mack, in a way I have to agree with her, to stand up and say enough is enough. And Sheriff Mack was more concerned about his sheriff's association, more concerned about what it was going to look to the other sheriffs across the country if this one sheriff stood up and said, no more, it's not going to happen in my county, it's not going to happen in my state. So there was a shouting match going on. In fact, my husband and Mr. Darby, who's made himself, I guess you call it a common law judge, that Sheriff Darby and Judge Darby and my husband were sitting out in the car waiting for me, and Gary Darby came back into the lobby and stood there witnessing the two of them in the shouting match with each other. And finally, I was able to get Sheriff Mack to sign retired Sheriff Mack to sign my book, and we walked out the door, and he and Victoria were still disagreeing with each other as they were walking out to their cars. Now, what I did was I got my husband and Mr. Darby back to our vehicle, and I went out to Victoria's vehicle to try to calm her down, and she thought that I was totally against what she was saying, so she started to come unglued again, and I had to call the president of the Oregon 3% over to try to help me calm her down and to kind of listen to what was going on. And we were able to explain to her that we stood with her, we understood what her point was, and that at the end of the day, she was two-thirds right and correct, and Sheriff Mack was only one-third correct in what he was saying. So, folks, we're going to go to station break, and then we're going to have Donna and I come back here on the show and discuss this a little bit more and try to figure out if any of you there in the chat room, what would you suggest that we do in a case like Victoria was right in what she was saying. We have to draw a line in the sand. We got to do it nonviolently. What would you have done if you had been in the lobby that day and listening to this argument between Victoria and Sheriff Mack? Victoria, now, she's really coasting on the tails of this. She's kind of in her own glory right now. And we have to make sure we bring her down more to reality, that she doesn't continue to be the militia princess that people are making her out to be. She happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and she's not the only one, but she also needs to come down to the real world right now and kind of temper it down a little bit. At the same time, fight the good fight. We'll be right back. This is Maggie Rose and Donna Hammond from Prineville, Oregon, and we're talking about the Patriot movement right now and what is going on with the theft of children being pulled into the foster care system, to punish parents for taking a stand for the Constitution and punish parents for being Christians. What are they going to do now? Punish more parents for homeschooling? Is that what's next coming? We've seen it happen before. We'll be right back. Hi, folks. This is Maggie Rose, and this is the new Concord Hour being brought to you on May the 4th, 2016, by the Microeffect Radio Broadcasting Network. And I have with me, today is Wednesday, Gals Day. My co-host is Donna Hammond from Prineville, Oregon. And Donna, I just got an email from a friend of mine. He listens in on the Microeffect down in California, and he and I went to high school together. He was a year behind me, and he's asking for the contact information I mentioned last week, who to contact to be an advocate for the treatment of our patriots in jail. I'm going to have to get that list out again, folks. I'm trying to get some more updated addresses on that. We do have some additional advocates out there coming forward. One of them happens to be up in Beaverton, Oregon. He happens to be a private attorney general by the name of Ron, and he's helping file some paperwork in courts for both the Bundys, their supporters, and also for the Hammonds. He's also my friend here from my former high school, is asking if they set up a GoFundMe site. Yes, they have, but what's been happening there is that, and this is coming from Surf One, by the way. Surf, just to let you know, what's happened many times, the government goes in and they find ways to close down or steal the money out of the GoFundMe sites. Now, I do understand there are a lot of prisoners in jail right now that have committed crimes. They're not political prisoners or people standing for the Constitution and due process, but have been sent to jail for murder or assault and battery or drugs or whatever, and they have GoFundMe sites that have been set up, and they're using that money in order to help pay for their legal fees. And it's interesting, the government is not going after those GoFundMe sites or trying to close down their accounts or take their money away from them. So anyway, with that said and done, I'm going to try to get the most updated list that I possibly can do. In the meantime, Donna, what do you think that the people need to do in cases of like what's happening with the Sharp family?
Well, I think we all need to really consider, if we're going to be vocal, we're going to step out and be engaged in this liberty rising movement. We're going to likely be in need of a few things to protect ourselves besides our guns. Those won't always be, that's the last resort, but it is something that you do need to be prepared with as well. But prior to that, getting your house in order, meaning if you own property, put it into a irrevocable trust. Find resources to accomplish that you can manage your property as a trustee, as a managing trustee, and then release the ego that you need to be the owner of it. Because if you own it, they can take it away from you. If it belongs to a trust, they cannot take it away from you. It's not yours. So do some research on that. Get an ironclad common law trust established. They're not that expensive, and that will protect your personal property, your cars and your homes. And then on a day-to-day basis, when you don't know when that knock at the door is going to come, or you're going to drive into your driveway and suddenly have, all the feds pulling you out, you have to have that on record. So having a little video camera on your body, like a body cam at all times, charged and full of capacity to just at the touch of a button be a second witness for you.
Now, a lot of people are very concerned about doing it under common law because, as you know, the courts don't acknowledge common law. They just kind of laugh and look the other direction because they try to pull us all into statutory law, into their statutory court. As you know, all the court systems have been set up since the Civil War to come under what they call admin law, admiralty law, which is like the law of the high seas, and under their statutes and statutory law. So statutory law and common law are two different things.
Exactly.
So if you do it under common law and put it in trust under common law, there's a very good chance of possibility that the courts will just laugh at it and that everything you've done has been for naught.
Well, if you do it under their jurisdiction, you suffer you put yourself under their jurisdiction. So I guess that's the thought process you need to discover whether or not. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Okay. Sometimes my headphones, I can hear you, and then after about 30 minutes it cuts out and I can't tell that you don't hear me for a little while. So it's still going, so that's good. But anyway, that's part of protecting your assets in advance. You're going to have to come to grips with which direction is the most advantageous, but you got to do something. Because if you just step into this fight unprepared, not only will you suddenly want to shrink back, but you may regret that you gave up everything that you've worked for. And so, like I would put my bets on the common law. However, if you do get sucked into the jurisdiction of, if you're still making contracts and doing things in commerce, in UCC commerce, then you kind of got yourself in both camps. And it's a really tough thing to be of the world, or in the world but not of the world, and that's what we're trying to do, is to survive without being caught up in this U.S. Inc.
Right.
That has put you in contracts that you had no knowledge of until decades later. Your birth certificate, your social security number, your retirement accounts, all these things put you into some type of a contract in a uniform commercial code, and so it's a darn tough thing to separate yourself and kind of be off the grid of that and still flourish and have a reasonable life that is still full.
I've got Gary is on Skype with us right now, and he wants me to ask you, Donna, what you see common law as being. What is common law to you?
Okay. Well, it's not statutory, so it would be outside of the code system.
Okay, so it'd be outside the statutory code. But, specifically, what is common law? What is your definition of common law?
Well, common law is what we have had coming forth from the Magna Carta, all that. That's what was we were originally established under, and it's only been in the last 150 years that statutory law has crept in and become the norm, when in fact common law is contracts between persons versus corporations.
Okay, there you go. And now if you were to look it up, common law is known as a noun, and if you were to look it up on the Internet, it would say it's part of the English law that is derived from custom and judicial precedent rather than statutes. Again, let me repeat that. The part of English law that is derived from custom and judicial precedent rather than statutes, often contrasted with statutory law. It's the body of English law as adopted and modified separately by the different states of the United States and by the federal government. It's denoting a partner in a marriage by common law, which recognize unions created by mutual agreement and public behavior, not by a civil or ecclesiastical ceremony. It's a law which exists and applies to a group on the basis of customs and legal precedents developed over hundreds of years in Britain. The common law is judicially created law that is developed on a case-by-case basis, wrote Chief Justice Hanna of the Supreme Court in Arkansas. So when you go back and you also look at common law was the ancient law of England that was based on those society customs and recognized and enforced by judgments and decrees of the courts. It was a law developed by judges and courts and similar tribunals, stated in decisions that nominally decide individual cases, but that in addition have those presidential effect on future cases. So we're statutory basically, what I see with statutory is that they basically make you guilty until you can prove yourself innocent. Under common law is the complete opposite of that. Common law is basically out there by the people, of the people, by the people. It is totally different from the government. And common law is something that has, as it said, stated here, it's been around for centuries, and I do not see that our political prisoners, I do not see that Victoria Sharp's mother, Mrs. Sharp, I don't see that any of them to be able to have any due process or any justice at all in the statutory courts. But, of course, as the Bundys are telling me, Donna, they do not want to deal with the common law in the courts. They want to try to use the statutory laws themselves against the court systems. They feel they have to work within it. Now, Gary wrote to me that what common law is also the obligations of debt under common law, which requires a completion of the contract or suffer the penalty. So again, let me repeat that. It's also, common law is the obligations of debt that are under common law that require completion of the contract or you suffer the penalties. Does that make any sense, Donna, to you?
Well, yeah, it means you honor whatever contract you engaged in. If you did so knowingly and willingly, that it follows that if you honor them, you complete them, whether that means a debt that you pay off or you renegotiate to the satisfaction of all, or, yeah, you suffer the consequences, because if somebody enters into an agreement and they renege, there has to be consequences.
That's true. And you're seeing that a lot of people are beginning to find out that when you give birth to your child in a hospital and there's a birth certificate signed by a licensed doctor, a licensed official, that person's license is being acknowledged, or that person's license is being supported by corporation. So your birth certificate for that child is taken and signed by the doctor, sent to the state that you live in, signed by a state official, and then it's sent back to the Federal Reserve, which is a private entity. People don't seem to understand. The Federal Reserve is not a government entity. It is a private entity. People have not taken the time or bothered to really research and discover that. Your birth certificate is then given...
It's been thought that was a conspiracy theorist, but I think in the last 10, 15 years, too many reputable people have acknowledged that, yes, the Federal Reserve is a private corporation.
Right.
That's no more American than
right. And we've been basically suckered into this. Our entire economy and society has been suckered into this for many, many decades. And when your birth certificate goes to the Federal Reserve, they send that birth certificate to the International Monetary Fund. the International Monetary Fund puts out a life insurance policy on that baby, stating when that child reaches between 16 and 18 years of age, that child will become a working citizen and start paying into the taxes, to the federal income taxes. And when that child dies at age 50, 60, 70, 80, or 90, that death certificate then gets signed by the hospital, the mortician, the coroner, gets sent to the state, which sends it back to the Federal Reserve, that sends it to the International Monetary Fund, and the International Monetary Fund pays the Federal Reserve on that life insurance policy. Now, it used to be at one time, every one of us had a secret life insurance policy taken out on us in the amount of $10,000. So the International Monetary Fund would pay to the Federal Reserve that $10,000 on the day that you die, because no longer now will you be a corporate slave earning income tax for the cabal. And that is the way it's been going for a long time. And a lot of people do not seem to be aware of the fact that they have literally, on the day that they were born, become corporate slaves. Now, for those women that gave birth at home and did home births and wrote the child's birth in the Bible, that Bible is just as legal a document as the birth certificate, only it means your child no longer has become part of a corporate slavitude, is what that basically means. But then, of course, when the child tries to go get a passport or a driver's license, that child's going to have to get that Bible, and it might have the name of that child and 5 other siblings in the Bible, and they're going to have to take that Bible with them every time they have to go get a legal document drawn up. And one of those legal documents is eventually, as you know, going to put them as part of the corporation, whether it's a driver's license, whether it's a California ID card or a Kansas ID card. Sooner or later, that child is going to be sucked in one way or another. Don't you agree?
Oh, yeah. I just had that conversation with some friends of mine that I meet with every week, and they were discussing, one of them was having to order a birth certificate, and I gave them that in a nutshell, though. They couldn't believe it. No, they rolled their eyes. I said, yes, when your hospital birth certificate with your doctor's signature and the hospital's name and your baby's footprint on it is no longer acceptable, and you have it, though, but they won't accept it. They insist that you go get the state-issued one. It's because they are monetizing your name, putting a dollar figure on your head, and you just stepped right into their system again.
Yes, exactly.
And so now, they do that. Even at 80 years old, they're still going to do that. They want that monetizing effect.
Oh, definitely. Now, also, Gary just wrote to me, he said Mrs. Sharp had defaulted on her house payments and was evicted. And the arrest, he said, is outside what it should be, even for hitting a cop. And I do agree on that. I mean, if I would be a mother tigress, too. If I had all my children taken from me but one, and I've got my 6-7-year-old son with me in the car, and they're literally pulling my car door open and trying to yank me out of my car, that is manhandling, okay? That is physical assault. Why does a person, because they wear a uniform and have a gun on their hip, have the right to physically manhandle? We have seen so many videos of cops stepping on people's throats, kicking them in the head, kicking them in the side, kicking them over and over again. I saw a YouTube video the other day, showed about 30 or 40 different incidences around the country of cops literally beating to a pulp some of these people who had done absolutely nothing. They even had their hands up in the air, got kicked to the ground, and then had their sides kicked in, their faces kicked in over and over and over again. And 90% of the time or more, these cops get away from it. So I think our government wants there to be a revolution. They want a situation like what happened in Seattle on May the 1st to take place around the country, but on a much grander scale. And right now, our militia, our Constitutional Guard, our 3%, our bearded bastards, our other militias, our oath keepers, everybody has been pretty much keeping their calm and cool, and yet we're the ones getting arrested and thrown in jail because we dared to have a weapon on a public road, because we dared to have open carry or concealed carry. I mean, when I'm looking in here, Donna, in the chat room, And I want to say hello to Bonnie, James Ken, Joe Sixpack, Mr. Virtue, not dead yet, Panzer, Sidafun, Theocrat, and Valerie. One of the things that somebody said here, Mr. Virtue, said that what's going on in this country right now is that it's a $1 trillion industry are our kids. And I think you'd agree with that, Donna, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's huge. It's human trafficking at its finest. We don't even realize that we've got shackles on it.
Well, Bonnie seems to think it's too late, and I don't know what she means by it's too late. It is probably, what she's saying is that what's happened in this country, when you look at the human trafficking, that children that have been brought into the foster care system were sold as sex slaves. What you need to do is go back to the story of what happened back east when the children from Boys Town, the boys and girls from Boys and Girls Town back there, were basically sold into sex slavery by politicians in Washington, D.C. We had congressmen, we had senators that were had their wives at home and their children at home, but liked to play games with little boys as well. And they spent millions of dollars to try to cover this up. And there was a big, huge scandal that was blown out of the water, and I've talked about it on previous shows. I'll probably bring it up again. But one of our guys that was the Vietnam veteran came back. He worked for the RAND campaign. He was a politician in Washington, D.C. himself, and he tried to expose what was going on with the sex trafficking of children in the foster care system, and it actually got a couple of his investigators murdered. One man was in an airplane with his son, and their plane was tinkered with, and the plane crashed, killing him right in the middle of his investigation that led all the way to the White House. You're right. It's an insidious thing going on in this country, and it's like a runaway train. And I've been praying hard, Donna, haven't you? But I'm not seeing that we're getting too many answers right now.
Well, I think there's a lot of humbling that needs to happen. I recall there's a scripture or saying, I guess, maybe, that God will have a humble people. We can either choose to be humble or can we become humbled. Either way. And there's a lot of house cleaning that the Lord needs to do to get us to that point. And unfortunately, there are innocents that get caught in the crossfire.
Well, as Mr. Virtue said, know your enemy, you'll win half the battle. And I think he's right about that. He's also asking us, please, to study historical jurisprudence, which I think is very important. If you study things about what's happened in the past, and you'll begin to understand the pattern that's going on, I think that's half the battle right there. Don't you agree?
Yeah, sure. You have to know your enemy, and you best know him by what has happened in the past, because that's the pattern.
Well, I just had Bonnie come up. She said there was an article in Sacramento, California, which, as you know, the greatest child sex scandal was Boys Town in Lincoln, Nebraska. But in Sacramento, California, she sent an article here, and I think that came from, pretty sure, it came from Bonnie. This article in Sacramento, California, those who deny the possibility of government deception on a large scale should re-examine the story of Boys Town and a black Republican politician named Lawrence or Larry King. For many, King and Boys Town are synonymous with the scandal involving child sex and drug abuse that officials in Lincoln, Nebraska were able to suppress and effectively cover up. And a woman named Carol Stitt, who is the director of the Nebraska Foster Care Review Board, explained in the documentary Conspiracy of Silence. That's a documentary, folks, that went out in the UK and in Ireland. But all of our politicians in Washington, D.C., our senators and our congressmen paid thousands and thousands of dollars to make sure that documentary was not shown here in public broadcasting documentaries here in the U.S. So I think folks need to go to that. They need to type in Lawrence King and the sex scandal in Lincoln, Nebraska, and the name of Carol Stitt, who is the director of Nebraska Foster Care Review Board. She was even under attack for trying to expose that even children today are being used in sexual slavery, and we'll cover that in another show. Well, Donna, thank you so much for coming on today. Do you have one last word before we go off the air?
Pray and prepare. I don't know.
Okay, so pray and prepare. Those are the two main P's, folks. This is Maggie Rose and Donna Hammond, and we'll be back with you again tomorrow on Thursday at the same time, same channel. We want to thank those people in the chat room for contributing and giving me some additional information. And that's right, it was Lincoln, Nebraska, the sex scandal took place. And I'd like you folks to do your homework and become a little bit more aware of what's going on out there in this country. Again, this is the New Concord Hour being brought to you by the Micro Effect Radio Broadcasting Network. The New Concord Hour is coming to you live every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 2 to 3 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, from 5 to 6 Eastern Standard Time, and, of course, Central is in between. And on Wednesdays, we have us gals with our commentaries, and any information you want to send to me, send to the New Concord Hour with Maggie at hotmail.com. You can find, again, my email address there at the Micro Effect, and I'm asking you, please, to patronize our sponsors that are helping to bring us live to you here on the New Concord Hour and on the Micro Effect. We'll talk to you tomorrow, same time, same station. God bless you all, folks, and pray and prepare. Good night.